Mhm. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's video 44 coming at you with another video. So, I just got to watching something that was pretty heavy, man. It was a partial, about 30 minutes worth of a conversation involving Mobb James and a gentleman by the name of Charleston White, I believe. Charleston for sure. I think White is the last name. I'm not sure, though. Never heard of him until today, but you know, throughout the beginning of the conversation, it was brought to my attention that there was some type of violent encounter between these two individuals. So I'm familiar with Mobb James from the Death Row fame. He was one of the individuals who was a part of that era and that whole situation on the Tupac side of things. And so my understanding, Mobb James, since then he's now kind of a talking personality, and he's someone who's turned his life around, stepped away from that stuff, and is now trying to uh, share his perspective and try to uplift people by doing so. So that's my understanding of Mobb James, and I guess he was in Texas to kind of lend his voice to this particular conversation, and it became a pretty intense because the two individuals are on such different spectrums. Mobb James is coming there basically saying, I lived this lifestyle and now I'm walking away from it. And Charleston White is essentially saying, I've seen so much harm done by gangs in my community, to my only concern is protecting the women and children in this community. And my perspective is that of if anybody who's not with that, and I'll be working with anyone who will help me do that, including the police and such and such. And he's just basically saying, loud and boisterously speaking of how he's very much interested in helping the police throw black males in jail who are gangbanging and doing what he perceives to be horrible things. And listen, I understand this is the trauma that can be birthed from being in the crossfire. You know what I mean? Like, I can be angry at a guy like Charleston for his perspective, but I understand it. That is trauma and pain screaming at you. Not interested in context, not interested in rationale, not interested in what's best, but more so just interested in the reckoning of what he was forced to see. That is what I think happens a lot of times when things get neglected, when we let things get out of hand, when balance isn't sought in whatever facet or form of life. You are going to see things just spew from that are exaggerated and and over the top as a result of that imbalance. And listen, Charleston White, I think his intentions are good, but he will do more harm than good with his good intentions, because he's not willing to, or it appeared in that conversation, he was not willing to listen, and he wasn't willing to gain perspective or context. All he was on was, if you're a gang member, I want to see you in jail. And the way he was wording things, it was like, I don't believe I can save no one out there, but if I can equip them for what they need, maybe they can save themselves. And it was just a lot of that kind of stuff that was being lost in translation in the heat of a conversation that would make it sound as if he was essentially saying that he didn't believe children could be helped out here, or black males could be helped out here, or that he didn't care. I went into the conversation expecting one thing. Midway through the conversation, I was thinking another. And then by the end of the conversation, I had come to the conclusion that I thought that even though those two individuals ultimately had to stand up in the face of one another, not willing to back down on each other's position, because Charleston was saying some things that just was rubbing Mobb James the wrong way, and vice versa. And eventually just came to a point where they had to stand up and just, they had reached their point where they were both upset with one another because of the difference of their opinion. But I felt like it was intriguing to me because you could see these two men, they're obviously both over the age of 50. And I think they understood that they didn't understand one another. And they also understood that they both kind of wanted to see the same thing, just felt like they needed to get there in different ways. And they both lacked perspective on one another's opinion and would never come to any understanding based on those perspectives. But I think Charleston missed an opportunity to understand something that would have helped him, just period, in his scope on things. Because what you don't want to do is ostracize yourself from the very people that you are trying to have stop doing something, if that makes any sense. If you're trying to get somebody to cease their behavior, the last thing you want to do is shut them off from being willing to listen to you. You see what I'm saying? And what he's doing is saying, yo, I'm calling the cops on y'all. I want to see y'all thrown in jail and this, that, and the third. And by the end of the video, where it got cut off, there was a man who had stood up, and he was essentially saying, like, to everyone in the room, do you know what it feels like to be in solitary confinement? Like, do you understand the perspective? And essentially what he was trying to get around to saying, I believe, was, you know, you don't understand the perspective. When you talk about you're willing to throw men in jail, do you understand what you're doing? You know, when you're working with the police, do you understand that you may be working with forces who are also immoral, who are also looking to harm those same people that you're looking to protect? Has that part ever crossed your mind? Are you so naive as to believe that, you know, the police are doing your bidding, and that they are looking to assist you in what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and that they wouldn't throw you in the same prison that you are trying to throw others into, you know? And his thing is like, well, I snitch my way out of that. And, you know, he turned it into a joke. It was kind of a funny way to kind of answer it, but I was hopeful that he understood the logic in that. It's like, yo, I understand you have a one-track mind, and like I said, he's working in a space of just being fed up, that traumatized, fed up nature, like whatever it takes, you know. But you do understand that you can do so much more harm than good by closing your ear to perspectives that are different than yours. Because if you're going to be so brazen as to try to destroy or wipe people out, you better understand what angles could attack you in response to that. Some of the very people that you're trying to work with in the police force may have people on the outside that they are intertwined with. You sitting up here thinking you could trust these police, you end up getting offed for being a snitch. It's like there are certain things that I understand he had good intentions, but there are certain things that he just needs to understand the type of danger that he put himself in when he speaks this way. You know what I mean? The type of forces that he's toying with, and how many different variables there are to consider. It's not something that you can approach simply. You know, even though what he saw was very easy to behold. Damage in his neighborhood, children crying, and worse, this needs to stop. And that's really all his mind to allow him to act upon. And he's loud and trying to lead others in what it is that he's doing. But one of the most important parts of leadership is being able to sit and listen and learn and accept what it is that you don't know, and be curious about what it is that you can learn at all times. You know, not being so satisfied with your perspective that you're not willing to make changes or make adjustments as new information comes your way. And definitely, by all means, not willing to shun new information. You can't be a leader and not being willing to look at a man's perspective and say, okay, why are you coming to me this way? And what I was encouraged by is I saw signs of that in both men at the end of the show. Even after they had stood up and confronted one another, they both sat down and said, brother, I understand. I think just like you. You know, Charleston said to Mobb James, you're not going to little bro me. You're not going to big homie me. I'm not your big homie. You know, and even though in the ways that he was communicating came off as ignorant to myself, I more so understood the overall sentiment of what both men were saying. And what they were doing was showing youngsters like ourselves, like myself, and people much younger than me, obviously, who will need to see people have a chest out, ego-based confrontation that doesn't lead to them lacking understanding that one another is probably doing the same thing and probably would rather not go to take it there, but still needs to demand that respect, like that man understanding that, yo, you ain't gonna punk me, I'm not gonna punk you, but I also understand where you're coming from. I thought that was a positive understanding. You know, sometimes we need to fight it out. A lot of times people resort to settling their differences with violence, But I think those two individuals showed us that you can find a way to handle it a third way, especially while other people are watching. So I thought that was a good display. Um, as far as Charleston's concerned, as a civilian, I don't agree. I just don't think that that's the way to go. Maybe it's because I grew up in Los Angeles and I kind of have a perspective of how corrupt um, things have been, not only on the streets but also in enforcement. Just how they have kind of maneuvered through this city and have been, you know, exposed as corrupt, and some of the tactics that they use within that corruption, using gang members, kind of treating people funny, keeping people fighting with one another, literally initiating gang wars themselves for financial gain in some cases. It's just like, yo, you can't trust them, Charleston. Like, no, you can't, brother. But there's someone out here like myself who understands what you're seeing. You need to see this stop. But what you're not going to get done is being able to protect the people that you love properly by waging war against the streets. That's not how you do it. That puts everybody you love in the crosshairs. It's the same thing I said about 6ix9ine. Once you do that, you're not only putting yourself in danger, but you're putting the people you love in danger. Because the streets do not play fair. That much I know. So yeah, that's, prayers out to everybody and anybody who would dare put themselves in that position. And that's that, man. Nobody wants to be given that bad news that their family member was lost to gun violence for any reason. But it's a lot of people out here playing with guns. A lot of stuff out here going on that doesn't